Hello and welcome to the TECHunplugged Videocast. I'm Max Mortillaro from TECHunplugged, and today I would like to talk a bit about multi-cloud. So multi-cloud is a term that we're hearing a lot lately in the industry. We've been hearing this term ramping up during 2018. It's coming into full force now. We are living more or less in the cloud era with many cloud providers available and solutions becoming increasingly available to run directly on the cloud or on hybrid. So first of all, what is intended as multi-cloud? The thing is that, as with many IT terms or enterprise, rather industry terms, you're going to have as much meanings as you have proponents or companies and so on. So one example is that you could take multi-cloud as all of the existing clouds that we are consuming. So in one way, we are already living in the multi-cloud because look at what you have, okay? Let's say this is my iPhone, I'm using iCloud here, and I've got my data on the cloud. So that's part of the cloud. I'm using a mail service, it's running on the cloud. I'm using whatever, some people are using, I don't know, SAP or other stuff which is running on the cloud. We can use Salesforce, and so on and so on. So that's a broad definition of what is the multi-cloud, okay? We're living in the multi-cloud world in a sense, but for the focus of, let's say, enterprise IT perhaps, or rather the use of IT infrastructure in a way, what is multi-cloud? Multi-cloud is really about being able to leverage multiple clouds. Here I'm talking more about public cloud providers which provide infrastructure services, so IaaS, things such as platform as a service and so on. I'm not really talking about the generic purpose application running on the cloud, but more about something which enables the companies to run their applications, their workloads, etc. Okay, so here we've set the scope of multi-cloud for the discussion here. So multi-cloud, does it make sense for organizations? I'm going to give the very classical answer that it depends. It depends because it really depends what you want to achieve with that. What is driving you first of all to go to the cloud? You go to the cloud because you want to have a certain flexibility in how you're consuming services, how you're consuming compute, storage, and so on. You want to make sure that you pay for what you're using. So this flexibility comes at a price because sometimes it's, even if people will say that it's not the fact, it's sometimes cheaper to run your own infrastructure. You can get people which are more or less qualified to run it, and if you're running stuff like VMware, hypervisors, and so on, it's not a big deal, right? But it really, cloud goes to the topic of flexibility. So I need to scale up massively and scale down massively my workloads based on my usage. And there are two things which come with cloud. One thing is, first of all, that it can very quickly become pricey if you don't measure ahead of time what your consumption is going to be. So you need to put barriers and keep costs under control. The second thing is that it's easy to move your data to the cloud, but it's expensive to get it out. It's expensive because it takes time, it takes bandwidth, and some of the bandwidth, in certain cases, is charged to you. So there's an aspect of data gravity which goes here, where it's easy to put it there, it's hard to move it somewhere else. And this applies not only if you want to retrieve your data back to your own on-premises data center, but if you want to move it to a different cloud, okay, it's going to take you time, and it's going to cost you money to move the data. So if you want to go for multi-cloud, you're somehow increasing the problem, increasing the complexity. So in my view, it's important to define the scope of what you want to use cloud for. Because if we go, for example, let's talk about storage, okay? You have S3, which is the standard for data, for object storage in the cloud. So you can use the same semantics more or less across multiple clouds to communicate, move with your data, and so on. But it's not exactly the same, and you need to train your teams to be able to understand the semantics of AWS, of Google Cloud, of Azure, and so on. And the same goes with all of the layers, okay? So networking, setting, VPNs, and whatever comes with that, everything needs to be kind of customized. You don't have some kind of POSIX for cloud. So the challenge here is, the more cloud providers you're adding, the more complexity you're adding to your environment. So multi-cloud makes sense if you have a well-defined use case where you want to do that. It can make sense if you want to to build a true level of resiliency which goes across zones, but you want to make sure that you protect yourself against the failure of a provider. It depends how complex your applications are, how business critical they are, and if it's worth the money and the investment going into that. Now again, if we take multi-cloud, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're using multi-cloud to run functions such as Lambda, or that you're using it to run containers, or that you're using it to run, VMs such as AMI VMs and so on. You may want to use multiple clouds for specific purposes. You may want to use multiple cloud because you are a regulated industry and you need to comply with certain requirements. It can be location, it can be data privacy, it can be, goes with that encryption and so on. You may need to use certain cloud providers based on some legislations. You may need, for example, if you're in countries such as Russia and so on, you may need to have the data on the country because it needs to be there. So that's one use case. The other use case is that you may want to segment usage because you have, you may want to spin up one of your organizations in the future and you want them to be somehow independent. And so you want to keep this kind of control so that you don't have to split things and make it more complicated. That's another aspect. Well, the third aspect as well is that sometimes some specialized clouds give better outcomes than using a general purpose cloud. And here I'm not saying that one is better than the other, but if you look, for example, at Pivotal and Pivotal Container Service, then it's really built from the ground up to support Kubernetes, okay? So when you go there and you build your thing, it's going to do what it needs to do. I'm not saying it's the best one. There are maybe other ones which are great. It's one of the few I know about Kubernetes. But that's one way to approach that. And sometimes it just makes more sense to go with this service because you have all of the bricks you need to get started to run your project. And you don't necessarily want to reinvent the wheel to create an entire Kubernetes infrastructure, let's say a vanilla infrastructure based on the general service of a public cloud provider. Now, I imagine for sure that Amazon has some Kubernetes service which is available and many others have, right? So in the end, multi-cloud does make sense in a way, but as with every decision, whether it is a business decision or an engineering decision, you need to weigh the pros and the cons and determine what is the outcome you want to achieve, and see in the end if the whole, let's say, idea that you had makes sense. And once you've done that, then you can probably have a better idea of whether you want to go for multi-cloud or not. So thank you a lot for listening to me today, and make sure to follow me on LinkedIn. You'll get all of the details in the next slide, and I wish you a great day. Thank you.